"You're too slow, old man. Move it or get run over." That voice, it didn't just echo in the movie theater lobby, it cut through the air like a slap, sharp, arrogant, cold. And it hit 87-year-old Joe Carter like a punch to the gut. He was just reaching for the door to Theater 4, ticket in hand, when the teenager's shoulder slammed into him, hard. Joe stumbled. His favorite wool hat, yeah, the one his wife used to tease him about, fell to the floor. The ticket fluttered from his hand and landed in a pool of melted Slurpee. Time slowed down. The lights, the posters, the endless chatter of families and kids and popcorn machines, it all spun in a nauseating blur. Joe grabbed the velvet rope divider to keep from falling flat. And for a second, he just stood there. Not because he was hurt, but because something inside him cracked wide open. This wasn't supposed to happen. Joe had come out to enjoy a film, a quiet afternoon, alone. His son Luke had suggested it. "Dad, you need to get out more. Go see that war movie. You'll like it." Joe had protested like always, but truth was, he was a little excited. He'd even dusted off his best tweed coat, polished those old leather shoes that had seen more years than most people in this theater. But now, here he was, staring at a bunch of teenagers who couldn't even be bothered to look back. The kid who pushed him, loud, smug, full of himself, was already laughing with his friends near the snack counter, acting like nothing happened. Joe bent over slowly, his knees creaking in protest. His fingers reached for the fallen ticket. That's when the teen shouted again. "Yo, someone get this guy a grabber stick! Grandpa's doing yoga over a movie stub!" More laughter, shrill, cruel. Joe didn't answer, not yet. He stood upright, slow and steady, pain blooming quietly in his back. And then, his voice, soft but sharp as a bayonet. "Young man," he said, eyes locked, unwavering. "A little courtesy costs nothing." But instead of backing down, the teen smirked wider, stepped closer, invading Joe's space like he owned it. "What are you gonna do, old-timer? Call bingo security? Need help finding your pudding?" More laughter, louder this time. And just when it looked like it might end, the shove came. Then the punch. A fist, out of nowhere, wild and clumsy, but fast. It cracked across Joe's cheek with a sickening thud. Gasps exploded around the lobby. Joe staggered. He didn't fall, but he dropped his phone. His legs shook, his vision blurred. And the teenager? He pumped his fist like he'd just won a championship. His friends whooped. One high-fived him. It wasn't just assault. It was humiliation. A manager came rushing over, finally, name tag shining, walkie-talkie clipped to her hip. "What is going on here?" she barked, glaring around like she'd walked into a food fight. The teenager, quick as a fox, put on his best innocent act. "He came at me. He was yelling, getting all weird. I just defended myself." And his crew? They backed him up, piling on their lies. Meanwhile, Joe, cheek swelling, heart thudding, was just trying to find his phone on the floor. He finally found it, fingers trembling. He tapped Luke's contact and whispered into the mic. "Trouble, theater lobby." That's all he managed before the phone slipped from his grasp again. And the manager? She looked at Joe like he was the problem. "Sir," she said sharply, "maybe it's best if you go home. We'll refund your ticket. No need for further disturbance." He blinked at her, stunned. Was she serious? The kid punches him, and he's the one getting told to leave? Joe sat down on the nearest bench. His jaw ached. His heart ached more. He didn't have the energy to argue. He just wanted his son. 1 minute passed. Then 2. The kid and his friends were still snickering. Joe closed his eyes, blocking them out, thinking of Martha. She always knew how to handle bullies like that. God, he missed her. He thought about walking out, just getting up and going home. But then, he thought about everything he hadn't walked away from. War zones, losses, years of sacrifice. And now, some punk kid in a movie theater was going to run him off? No, he was staying. 4 minutes gone. The air changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just a presence. The lobby doors swung open, quiet but with command, and in walked 4 men. Not in uniform, but you knew. You knew who they were the second you saw how they moved. They didn't look left or right, didn't need to. They scanned, assessed, closed in. The one in front, maybe late 40s, sharp jaw, eyes like steel. Luke Carter. Joe's son, and the leader of an elite special operations unit. He saw his dad on the bench, slumped, bruised, and everything about his face changed. That calm? Gone. His pace quickened. The other 3 spread out like wolves circling a threat. And for the first time since the punch, the teenager shut up. He knew. Everybody knew. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Luke didn't speak at first. He just knelt beside his father, one hand hovering near the swelling on Joe's cheek, his other clenched into a fist so tight it trembled. You could feel the heat rolling off him, not rage, but something deeper, sharper, protective. "Dad," he said quietly, "who did this?" Joe managed a weak smile, his voice barely above a whisper. "That kid over there, the one trying not to wet himself." Luke stood up slowly, not rushed, not aggressive, just deliberate. And somehow that made it scarier. His teammates mirrored the movement, surrounding Joe without a word. Not one of them needed orders. They just knew. The manager, finally realizing this wasn't just some retiree and his bowling buddies, rushed over. "Sir, sir," she stammered, "I think this was all a misunderstanding. We've got it handled." Luke didn't even glance at her. His eyes locked onto the teenager, who now looked like he was about to be sick. "Did you touch my father?" The teen's smirk was gone, completely. He was blocking the line. I didn't mean he started it." "You punched an 87-year-old man?" Luke's voice was quiet, ice cold. One of Luke's men, a mountain of muscle with arms like tree trunks, stepped forward. He reached into his coat and flashed a leather wallet with a federal ID. That's when the room really went silent. The security guards near the entrance backed up a step. The manager's jaw fell open. And the teenager? He went from pale to paper white. The big man turned to Luke. "Commander Carter," he said clearly, "maybe it's time we let them know exactly who they laid hands on." Luke nodded, never breaking eye contact with the boy. "This man is Joe Carter, retired Master Sergeant, United States Army," Luke said, his voice rising just enough to carry. "He served 30 years. 30 years of keeping people like you safe while you grew up watching cartoons and playing Call of Duty." He took a step closer. "He fought in 2 wars, earned a Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, a Distinguished Service Cross, and he didn't ask for a single one." Now the kid's friends were trying to inch away, but Luke's men casually blocked them. "You hit him because you thought he was weak, because you thought no one would stand up for him," Luke said. "But guess what? He stood up for people his entire life." The teenager opened his mouth, probably to lie again, but nothing came out. Luke's voice dropped low. "You think a punch makes you strong? Try watching your friends die in combat and still getting up the next day. Try coming home and living with what you've seen. Try carrying that weight. That's strength. That's courage." He paused, let it hang in the air. Punching an old man? That's just cowardice in expensive sneakers. The manager, voice cracking, finally stepped in. "Mr. Carter, Sergeant Carter, I am so sorry. We didn't know." Luke's eyes cut to her, sharp and unforgiving. "No, you didn't ask." The words hit her harder than a shout. She looked down, ashamed. Did you look at him and see a man who lived through more than you ever will? Or did you see a problem, a delay in your schedule? She opened her mouth to apologize again, but another voice cut in. It was the older woman who had offered Joe the tissue earlier. She stepped forward, chin up. "I saw it all," she said. "That boy attacked him, unprovoked. They laughed at him, called him names, then he hit him." Her voice didn't shake. Her finger pointed right at the teen, who now looked like he wanted to vanish into the carpet. Other patrons started speaking up, quiet at first, then louder. People who'd seen it but hadn't said anything, emboldened now. And the security guards? They weren't smirking anymore. They were radioing the police. The teen tried to speak, tried to twist the story, but the lies had no oxygen left. None of his friends backed him up this time. They stood frozen, their bravado dissolved in the face of something they'd never experienced before: accountability. A few minutes later, 2 uniformed officers entered. One of Luke's men nodded at them and gave a quick summary. The cops took it from there. The teen started to cry, full-on sobs. "I didn't mean it," he whimpered. "I didn't know who he was. I was just being stupid." Luke didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He just looked at the boy, then said calmly, "You're old enough to throw a punch. You're old enough to learn what it means to respect someone." Joe stood then, leaning on his cane. He looked at the teenager, not with rage, not with revenge in his eyes, just sadness. "I hope," he said quietly, "you remember this moment, not for what you did, but for the chance to be better, starting now." You could hear a pin drop. The officers began asking the teens for IDs. The manager quietly informed them they were banned for life. Then she turned to Joe and Luke. "Please," she said, "your tickets, concessions, anything at all. It's on us. We are so sorry." Luke shook his head. "My father came here for one thing," he said, "to watch a movie. That's all he wanted." And with that, he helped Joe toward the auditorium doors. One of his teammates stepped beside them, clearly planning to stay through the film. As they walked, the crowd moved aside, but this time, people weren't just stepping away. They were standing in respect. Some whispered, "Thank you, sir." Others murmured apologies. One man placed a hand over his heart. And Joe? Joe didn't say much. But there was something in the way he walked now, straighter, lighter. Not because he felt stronger, but because everyone else finally saw it. Joe lowered himself slowly into the plush seat of Theater 4, Luke on his right, and the granite-faced teammate who hadn't said a word the entire time on his left. It wasn't just security anymore. It was dignity. It was honor. The lights dimmed, the trailers rolled, but Joe barely noticed. For a long moment, he just stared at the screen, breathing in the quiet. It wasn't the film that moved him. It was the silence, the peace. No sneers, no dismissive glances, no disrespect. Just the hum of anticipation and the rustle of popcorn. He was finally seen. Outside the theater, the teen and his friends sat slumped in a police cruiser, faces streaked with panic and regret. No one laughed now. Their tough guy act had collapsed into stunned silence. One of the officers jotted notes beside the open door, explaining the seriousness of the charges. Assault on a senior citizen. That's not just teenage mischief. That's jail time. They didn't argue. What could they say? And inside, the theater manager had retreated to her office, shaken. Not just because of the public relations nightmare, but because of the mirror that had been held up to her behavior. She'd seen an old man slowing down the line. She hadn't seen the soldier. She hadn't seen the father, the widower, the man who carried generations of sacrifice on his shoulders. And now she couldn't unsee it. Hours later, when the movie ended, Joe stepped into the lobby once more. But this time, it was different. The lobby wasn't just a place for soda machines and ticket stubs. It felt reverent, like something had shifted. A quiet acknowledgement hung in the air, even though most of the crowd had changed. Joe adjusted his coat and looked around. It had been a long time since someone looked him in the eye with respect. Not pity, not polite awkwardness, respect. Luke clapped a hand gently on his back. "Ready, Dad?" Joe nodded. "Let's go home." But the story didn't end that day. A week later, something unusual appeared in the theater lobby. A plaque. Nothing flashy, just a brushed metal rectangle mounted beside the entrance to Theater 4. It read, "In honor of our veterans, to those who served with courage, lived with humility, and reminded us all what dignity truly means." Joe saw it during his next visit. Luke had convinced him to come back, just to see what they've changed. He stood there in front of the plaque for a long time, said nothing. Then, almost under his breath, he whispered, "Martha would have liked this." And Luke, he just smiled. She would have made the manager cry even harder. They laughed together, not loud, but deep, the kind of laugh that clears the cobwebs from your soul. That day, something else happened. Out in a neighborhood park on the edge of town, a small group of teenagers were playing a chaotic game of kickball. One wild kick sent the ball spinning across the sidewalk and straight into an older woman's shopping cart. She stumbled, her groceries spilled, and instantly one of the teens, a kid with bright orange hair and way too big sneakers, rushed forward. "No, no, ma'am, I got it," he said, scooping up apples, gently helping her steady herself. "I'm really sorry. You okay?" Across the path, seated on a weather-worn bench under a maple tree, Joe watched quietly, didn't say a word. But when the kid's eyes met his, Joe gave a small, subtle nod. Nothing grand, just a signal. Maybe the world was listening. Maybe something had changed. And maybe not all lessons are forgotten. The final piece of this story didn't come from the courtroom or the news. It came from something much quieter. Joe Carter went back to his routines. The morning walks, the small talks with neighbors, the visits from Luke. Nothing dramatically changed, but something inside him had softened, just a little. And more importantly, something in his community changed. People greeted him differently now. Cashiers who used to rush past him paused to ask how he was doing. Teenagers who once stared through him nodded respectfully when they passed him on the street. The world hadn't turned upside down, but it had tilted slightly in his favor. The theater manager, her name was Beth, by the way, reached out personally. She didn't send a form letter. She came to Joe's house, brought coffee and a box of his favorite shortbread cookies. She didn't say much at first, just sat on his porch swing next to him, both of them watching the wind move through the trees. After a while, she turned to him, her voice quiet. "I failed you, Mr. Carter, and I'm sorry." Joe just nodded. "You saw what most people see." "But now I know better," she said. "I promise I won't forget it." And she didn't. She started a Veteran Guest of Honor program at the theater. Every month, a seat was reserved in Theater 4 for someone who had served. It wasn't advertised, no press, just a simple gesture, a small note on the seat and a complimentary ticket. And every time, someone from the staff personally thanked them for their service. Joe never asked for it. He never wanted any of it. But when he saw the first vet walk into that seat, his eyes got glassy, and he just whispered, "Good." As for Luke, something shifted in him too. He started showing up more. Not because his dad needed help, but because he needed it. They didn't talk about that day often. They didn't need to. But every now and then, when they sat down to lunch or watched a ball game together, Luke would glance at his father with a little more understanding, a little more pride. One afternoon, as they sat on the back porch watching the sun go down, Luke turned and asked, "You ever think about writing it all down? Your stories, your service, what you've seen?" Joe smiled faintly. "Nah, most of it's just noise to people now." "Not to me," Luke said. "Not anymore." Joe didn't answer right away. He looked out across the yard. Birds chirping, wind wrestling, peaceful. Then he said something Luke never forgot. "I spent my whole life fighting for people I'd never meet. Now, maybe, I've lived long enough to see why that mattered." And that's the heart of this story. It's not about a teenager who got what was coming to him. It's not even about a Navy SEAL walking into a theater like some action movie moment. It's about the quiet strength of a man who didn't need to prove anything, but still reminded everyone what real strength looks like. It's about the kind of courage that isn't loud, the kind that stands in line for a movie ticket, wears an old tweed coat, and still holds the line. Because sometimes the strongest people in the world are the ones who ask for nothing and still give everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Join us for more powerful and inspiring journeys. Thank you for watching.